Object Matrix. We're from Wales, a Welsh company that provides secure storage for broadcast, post, those sorts of things. First part of the presentation, about 140 slides on storage. And then the last bit's a little bit salesy, so hopefully you'll stay with it. So we're going to basically talk about what we call pre-production file-based workflows, or pre-KIs, what you do with your data on ingest, especially with file-based technologies. I'll try and talk about some of the problems that we've seen from small clients to large. I imagine that you'll recognize a few of them. But to kick things off, I'll ask a question. Right, hands up first, who knows what a petabyte is? 1, 2, 3, 4. Not too bad. Better than Glasgow. So a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. In the year 2000, some of the largest storage companies only had 1 or 2 customers with a petabyte of storage. The Department of Health, those sort of people. Now EMC, world's largest storage company, has over 2,000 customers with a petabyte of storage. And they're growing on to the next one, which is, I believe, is exabyte. So we're getting into it. So can anyone guess how heavy a petabyte is in kilograms?
That's blown my brain, that question. Do you mean as a hard disk?
Physically. A petabyte worth of hard disk, how heavy?
A petabyte worth of hard disk is probably about 10 kilos. Okay.
So in 1980, it weighed 250,000 tons and cost $40 billion. Now we have this as a blog post on our site, and people quite rightly say to me, yes, but that doesn't include the casing for the disk. So what we're seeing is that today, with 3 terabyte drives, we're around the 243 kilo mark of physical drives. And with 4 and 5 terabyte drives coming out soon, that'll obviously decrease. What it's shown you in a relatively short period of time, disk technology has sort of really blossomed, as you can all imagine. You know, disk technology isn't new, it's 50 years old plus. But we're finding now that with advances, with Moore's law, is that we're getting more for less in terms of disk. So we can do more with it, and we can store more information. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges faced by Tapeless cameras and how you manage that data, ingesting vast amounts of content. And vast can be vast if you're a post facility like Sumner's in the center, or if you're a 1 or 2 man band, getting potentially hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes of data, vast in different terms. How do you protect that data? How do you ensure that the data that was on the card is the same as you're working on? And also, if you're getting Tapeless footage in every day or every week, how do you ensure that you define a good process to ensure that it's repeatable? So you try and iron out any mistakes. And I'll also talk about metadata. So this is I'd say this was the old-fashioned approach, but this is obviously still in production in many places. We bring the content in, we digitize it, we put it on a shelf. Any problems, we bring the tape back, we re-digitize, we work on it. However, with tapeless cameras, due to the inherent cost of the media, that's got to go back out to be reused. There's no shelf. What do we do with all this, basically this file-based content? So we'll look at some coping strategies. Now these coping strategies are used from the smallest of independents all the way up to the BBC next door. So SAN, Storage Area Network, this is an editing platform, storage platform, shared storage, so all your editors can access the content in the same time. What we'll do is we'll add a bit more onto it. Now this isn't the way to protect content. It becomes hard to manage and your storage becomes slower. But in this workflow, it's the only thing that those engineering departments know. Anyone here put this stuff on FireWire or USB drives? In a shelf, in the drawer? Yeah? So these things, unless you spin them up every 6 or 12 months, statistically will fail. Yeah? And also, if you're doing this, make sure you've got 2 copies. At least. Now, we know many workflows where people are using USB drives from Maplin because they cost £100, but they're treating them like a tape. So actually, they've got shelves of these drives, but they're only utilised by about 20% because they're treating it like a tape. They're keeping the old tape workflow. So when you're moving Tapeless, you've really got to think about data management. I know it's insanely boring. You'd rather think about lenses, lighting, and what editing tool. But sadly, you're going to have to start thinking about storage and the process of ensuring your data is protected. And if it's on tape, then in most facilities that have this, there's some poor runner that has to go off and find the tapes for you. And this person could be doing a job that's better for themselves or for your facility or organisation than going down and finding dusty tapes. So this is a bunker under Tottenham Court Road. It's 4 miles long, and challenge to see how many different types of tape format you can see. So you've got Betamax, you've got film cans, you've got Winchester drives, you've got everything down there. There are 4 miles of this in a disused tunnel. Now, Channel 4 use this, ITV use this place. If they want content back, you can imagine how long it takes to come back.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly the cleanest environment either. But you get the message, and on it goes. That's the very sad editing skills of Object Matrix. So come back to the challenges. So you've got all this content, it may be hundreds of gigabytes, it may be hundreds of terabytes. You've got to work out where you're going to put this stuff. You can't just chuck it on a drive, you've got to think about, okay, who's this project for? What project is it? Do I organise my directory structure in terms of clients, in terms of projects for that client? Shoot days of the shoot. It's really important you get yourself into a structure or organise yourself so that you can know exactly where your data is going to go when you come in from shooting. How many copies? Well, minimum 2. I think there's in Scotland someone mentioned the 3-2-1, 3 copies, 2 on site, 1 off site. If you're a facility and you've got your customers' content coming into you on tape base, and you give them the disk back or the drive back, the last thing you want to be saying to that customer is, oh, can I have that back please, because we lost it internally or it got broken. So it's really important to ensure that your data is bulletproof. What sort of storage do I use? LTO, cheap, pop down to Maplin, go and buy a drive, mini RAID units, big RAID units, storage areas networks, or the bigger end, clustered storage solutions that are self-managing. So another question you've got to ask yourself is, how do I make sure that my data is going to be readable in 5 years' time? If I buy myself a little RAID device, have you heard of a Drobo? Drobos are great. Take all 5 drives out, put them on a shelf, put 5 in. You want those 5 back, put them back in. Lovely. Until the Drobo is no longer supported. This is a proprietary file system. Sorry, friends from Drobo. So it's really important that if you're thinking about the longevity of your data, that you keep it in formats that are going to be hopefully around in X years' time, but also on a medium that's going to be around in a few years' time. So the tape guys have come up with LTFS, which is a format that's interchangeable. So you really need to think about the longevity if that is part of what you're interested in. If you're going to keep this content a long time, think about the platform you're putting it on. And ask the question, is it proprietary? Does my data belong to me or to the person selling me the hardware? So content protection, trust. Producers don't particularly like to trust Tapeless workflows because they can't feel and touch it. So basically you have to give your clients the comfort feeling that that you're looking after the data for them. So if they give you a card or cards, you give them back a report that says, this is the data you gave me, thank you very much. Because 6 months down the line when they say, oh, we gave you that shot, you need to know, we've got a process here, this is what we signed off on. Again, insanely boring, but it will sort of, putting good practice into place will help you further down the line. And again, these days you can get a number of hardware devices, small devices from the field that will do dual copies and authenticate that copy. Now, authenticated copies means that I can guarantee that if I make 2 copies of this, that it's exactly the same. And we do this thing called fingerprinting or hashing algorithms. So byte for byte, bit for bit, we can guarantee that the data that the client gave you is the 2 that you, or the 1 or 2 that you have. Because again, if they come back and say, well, we gave you this data, and you say, well, no, that was corrupted, you have a problem. Lose the data, lose your job. Sounds a bit harsh, but it's the truth. We had a potential customer who came to us and had a RAID device and said, oh, I've got a RAID device, it's RAID, it's fine. I don't need any more protection. And it was £6,000 instead of £20,000. Okay, fine. So they got a job from a large broadcaster and the RAID device just went bang. Not the disk, but the actual device. They spent £40,000 getting the data recovered from specialist providers, and we got a purchase order the week afterwards. Because you literally cannot afford to lose your customers' data. There's no way they'd go back to that large broadcaster and say, I lost your data, because they'd never get work again. And more we're seeing more of an insurance or compliance burden. So if you're part of a large company, that company's owned by an American company, then you'll have some sort of US legislation put on you to ensure that should your building burn down, your business will still continue, which means putting your data somewhere safe and ensuring it's always protected. Projects often don't get insurance shoots because there aren't guaranteed to be 2 or 3 copies. So again, these are all things you've got to think about when you're doing this. We've talked about authenticity a little bit, guaranteeing that the data you're given is the same that you're working on. And also, going back every now and then to check that data is okay. So if you are using USB drives, spin them up every now and then and check they're all right, check that you've got the data on there. Obviously the time and the labor in that is quite painful, so obviously try and look for something that helps you with that automation. Repeatable, you're going to be doing this every day. We've got customers who have 20 or 50 P2 cards come in every day through the ingest station. They need to make sure they've got processes that are repeatable so that they can audit them and they can tweak them so that, you know, if there are improvements to be made, they can do that. And a lot of that stuff then comes down to automation. How much of this can you automate? Because when you start to automate, you can start to make that a much more governed workflow. And again, providing an audit trail. This is the data you gave me, Mr. Customer, and this is the proof of what you gave me. So one of the big things that we have a concept: if you can't find it, you don't have it. It doesn't matter if you've got it somewhere, but it's useless to you if you can't actually find it. Creative people apparently spend, try and find something 83 times a week, but only ever find what they're looking for 15 to 20% of the time. So it's kind of important these days that we look at the metadata side of things. So obviously in the good old days, this is the metadata here, and it's probably logged in a book somewhere or a spreadsheet or a database. But these days the metadata is actually living with the content. So wrappers like MXF, data and metadata. Hopefully there'll be a standard one day where you've got not just the BBC MXF, the Avid MXF, whoever else is MXF, but a truly shared piece of content. But your future access to your data is only as good as what you name it. And the file name is metadata. The structure of the directory structure is metadata. Or if you've got an asset management solution, then having something in the asset management solution that tells you where your data is. Now on these cards, a lot of the cards that you get out of the camera will name something much like your the photos you have on your iPhone or any camera. P1.00 or a couple of X's. So if you leave that the clip name as that, or file name as that, then you'll never find it in the future. So it's important to think about what you're going to name your clips, or if you can preset anything on the camera, try and make it as identical as possible, like using the letters to say this was camera 1 or camera 2 or things like that. But it really is important. Metadata is going to be very, very key. And it happens throughout the entire process. So we can put metadata on our camera. It automatically puts data on it, pre-filled some feeds. During the ingest, we've got people who are logging. DAM, you may have heard of this phrase, DAMs, MAMs, PAMs. Asset management. That basically means, here are my files, here's some metadata about them, here are some thumbnails of what that clip looks like. I can add metadata to say it's a blue field, green car. or the other way around. Delivery and archive. So metadata now lives through the entire process. So this is a slightly salesy bit. So we have a product called Matrix Store, and it's designed for digital preservation. Our enterprise product starts at around 20 terabytes, 10 to 20 terabytes, depending on how many copies you have. And we have a mini solution that starts at 3 terabytes. And it's all about automation. So I'm going to show you how it's used in a couple of scenarios, in particular the guaranteed ingest. So again, one of our mantras is if you don't have 2 copies, you don't have it. So we can see here that we actually put the data on 2 separate RAID 6 devices. So this is RAID 6, that's RAID 6. And we take a digital fingerprint on each. And we also take a fingerprint on the client that this machine came from. If those 3 don't match, we don't store it. If they do match, we know instantly we've got 2 very good authentic copies of that data. That card can now be deleted and sent off. Once you've got this data, you don't want anyone accidentally deleting something from your storage. Now this happens quite often. Even administrators with years of IT experience will delete content accidentally. So we can create something called a vault, and we can protect this content from accidentally being deleted. So if you've got a production that's going to last 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, we can lock this content down so you can't accidentally do anything, or someone can't maliciously do anything. After this period has passed, you can then delete it. It doesn't delete it for you. We don't like deleting data. It means that Mark can't sell more storage. So, metadata. Our solution is actually something called object storage, hence the name. Objects in data terms are the data, the essence, so the clip, and the metadata, which is the information about that clip. We protect both as strongly as each other. Because if you don't have the metadata, you don't have the clip, in effect. So on ingest, done that bit. On ingest, we can add metadata on the fly. We can actually extract some of the data out of a PT card, so that this content is now protected with its data and its metadata, which means that a few months down the line, you can actually do a search for anything that was Human Planet or Stellar, and pull the clips back that you need. Instead of going and traversing lots of USB drives, lots of RAID solutions, looking down directory trees, we're all used to our sort of Google lives now of searching and using metadata. And this is very much the interface that we're moving to. So it gives you a really strong repository for your rushes. And the last one is, because it's on disk, you can actually use it. So we have a lot of customers who have an ISIS here, or a Unity, or an XSAN, and prior to purchasing Matrix Store, they would put it straight on the SAN. Now, when you've got tapeless footage, 60-to-1 shooting ratios, and a cameraman who left the camera running in the back of the car, you're using up a lot of space for this HD content. So we're actually seeing people put it into Matrix Store first, because it's more cost-effective and it's managed. They can search for the clips they want and only move the clips they need to edit onto their storage platform, onto their editing storage. So we can present the Matrix Store Vault as a file system, so you can link in terms of Avid, you can link with AMA straight to the content in Matrix Store and only consolidate the clips you want off. So a little couple of case studies. Sumner's in the center. Before they purchased Matrix Store, cards coming in, they would verify on a client machine, pop it on a standard RAID device, put a copy on tape, and then the data would be copied to and from, transcoded into ISIS. Now that's fine if you've got 1 or 2 jobs happening, but they have many jobs, and so they need access to this content all of the time. But they can't afford to grow their ISIS because it's too expensive, and it's not the right place to hold sort of lots of data. So now everything comes into Matrix Store. All the editing clients can link straight to the content and only move what they need onto the ISIS, and they back up the tape from us. Now this tape is actually more of a copy for the customer rather than another offsite copy. So that's the ingest at Sumners. Down in South Wales, BBC Wales uses for the reversioning of Human Planet. So Human Planet, tons of HD content. They couldn't keep it all on their ISIS because they got Crime Watch, sports, all that stuff going on. So they put it all in us. And then when they needed it, they just linked to us, looked at what they wanted to bring back, topped and tailed, and then pushed it onto the ISIS. They're also currently keeping the last 2 or 3 years of the Welsh rugby on there, which is great for me. When work is done, I can go home now. So that when they're making the Six Nations stuff, they can just constantly go back and find the clips that they need. Previously, that would all have sat on the ISIS. So it's making this burden on their production and storage that they just don't need. So what they've got is really secure and robust storage. SAN-style architecture in that they can access their data at any time. It solves the bottleneck, and it does all this management of your content for you, so you can actually carry on and do the work that you need to do. Now, I think I mentioned the mini cluster earlier. This is what it looks like. We have a competition on at the moment where you can win one of these. All you have to do is request an item of our clothing, and we'll happily send you a beanie or one of our rugby jerseys. You have to get a picture of yourself in it, taken somewhere, a bit odd, and we'll judge it, and we're going to give one away at IBC. We also have a best photoshopped one. There's the mannequin Pearce there in Belgium. You get the idea, right? So best Photoshop version, best personal, all the rest of it. So I've got some cards, Mark's got some cards as well. If you'd like to take a card of us, if you'd like to talk about the storage, we're around. If you'd like to take part in the competition and request an item of clothing, then we'll be giving away one of these at IBC.
I've got some brochures as well.
Okay. Both Mark and myself are prolific Twitterers, which might set us back in your estimation or not, I don't know. There are our contact details. Are there any questions? Always scared you all about data management.
What is inside those boxes?
Magic and stuff.
Is it a spinning disk?
It is, yeah.
Because you've just told us that if you don't start those up every 6 months, they'll fail.
Yeah, but these ones are constantly running.
Oh.
Because these are the mini computers. So these three here, these are actually 3 small computers that are connected on a switch. They're constantly running. You can switch them off, but you can switch back on again. So they're self-healing. What we have is a self-managing solution that if one of our nodes fails, because you've got 2 copies, it will automatically copy the data to another what we call a node, another computer in the cluster. So this is a automated thing that is on at all times. It's not something you put on the shelf. I can discuss that with you offline if you like.
So it's always running. What about where it's at?
You write it down the node. You buy support. Yeah,
It's here, so
absolutely, yeah, indeed. Yeah. That's the model. You know, in fairness, these are commodity off-the-shelf hardware, so we're not in the game of you buy 3 nodes and you must buy the same size and the same type year after year. You're not tied into us at all. We store the data in standard format, so if it's a ProRes file, if it's an MXF, a PDF on your laptop, it'll be the same in Matrix store on a standard Linux file system. So you're not tied into us in any way. When you add in new nodes, because your capacity is growing, actually you'll be adding newer hardware, so there'll be different types. Your data can migrate from the older ones to the new ones. I guess it very much depends on your size of operation and how much data you get through and how much you value that sort of automated protection.
Are you still in deliverables or just the rushes?
Anything. So we have 3 workflows. One is the rushes, which is kind of the focus of this, but a lot of our customers use this as a parking space. They've got loads of work coming in, the production storage is full, I just need to dump it somewhere, so they can, with a single click, drop full directories or workspaces into Matrix Store, add some metadata, and then bring it back when they need. Or they can link with AMA, or through an LLE, just to look at it in Matrix Store and go, oh, that's where I want to bring it back. We're also used as an archive, traditional archive. So places like BT have about half a petabyte of this stuff for the BT Vision platform, and that's just where they come in, pick their programming, reversion it, top and tail it, and broadcast it. So it's used for all 3, but we're just specifically talking about ingest workflows today.
Are you using enterprise class drives in there then? And
We
would you
are.
like to describe what the difference is?
About $50 a unit. Enterprise drives, well, I couldn't personally give you the exact difference between them. I mean, they're meant to be better quality, they're meant to fail less, all the rest of it. And in our experience, that is the case. But we did use standard the green drives as well. In our environment, in RAID environment, they never get the chance to spin down, so it makes no sense. The good thing about the technology, as well as that diagram in the beginning about the capacity in drives, is that we were using 400 gigabyte drives 2 or 3 years ago. The 3 terabyte drives we're using today are consuming the same, if not slightly more power. So that footprint has stayed the same, the power footprint has stayed the same, but your capacity is trebled or quadrupled. So, you know, it isn't actually that expensive to keep these things running long term.
So is Enterprise a brand or is it a type?
It's type. Yes, you can get Hitachi Enterprise drives, Seagate Enterprise drives. I think you get Seagate Enterprise drives.
Yeah, please.
You get them all. I think because they can add extra monitoring on them as well, so they can do some sort of smart shutdown and all the rest of it. But we only use the Enterprise because we just don't end up having to swap them out as much. And at the moment, they're easy to get because all of the commodity ones are just gone because of the floods.
Because in the standard drives that are available, I mean, I've basically looked at the failure figures on various websites, and I haven't been confident to buy anything for the last year. Anything above say 500 gigabytes is rubbish. It's like anything from sort of 6 to 10% failure on the bottom two kind of scores of it.
Yeah, well, I guess you've got to look at.
I just don't know how that anybody can even. My drive seems to be more reliable on that, but the figures that go up as to how many fails, unless we've got an incredibly rubbish delivery system that smashes every drive, and that's where the 10% is, I don't know.
Quite possibly. If you look at the people like Amazon and Google, these guys have got entire football fields worth of disks. And you know, their mean time to failure, the percentages aren't as bad as that, I believe. So it could be environmentals. But one thing you should do is if you're buying disks and you're going to protect your content on two disks, 2 copies, make sure they're not from the same batch and from the same manufacturer and all the rest of it, because they could have come out from the factory that was at the wrong time, that there's some mud left from the flood or whatever, and it got on the platters. So it is important to think about those. I think it's really sad to have to do so, but that's what we have to do. For reliability, we've had, touch wood, we've built, we've deployed since in the last year and a half, we deployed about 2 petabytes worth of storage. And one or two drives have gone in that time.
And do you have favourite brands?
Hitachi at the moment.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's some to drives.
That's what I started with how many years ago, and then they turned to rubbish. And the old version, now they.
Do you know,
it goes around, doesn't it?
The sad thing, well, the sad thing for you guys is that you're going to have to embrace this storage technology, because tapes ain't going back in cameras anytime soon. So, and unfortunately, it isn't a choice anymore. It's now, what am I going to do to look after my content? So, there's going to have to be a little bit of an IT geek in all of you, I'm afraid.
We are a very small company, to go tapeless.
Okay.
Is this a completely naive solution? We're going to buy a dual layer Blu-ray recorder,
right,
and we're going to put the files on as ROMs onto a Blu-ray. Now, a Blu-ray disc is not a hard drive, it's never spinning, it can hold 50 gigs of thing, it could have, say, 3 or 4 Blu-rays. Is that a good solution for a very small company?
If you're going to do that, you might want to look at something like, I wouldn't, personally, because how long is Blu-ray going to be supported? How long is your Blu-ray drive going to be supported? If you're thinking short term, next 2 or 3 years, then yeah, probably not a problem. But, and your Blu-ray drive will probably last through a nuclear holocaust. However, your drives won't. So I think it's important you think about what media I do that on. So I would be more tempted to look at something like a tape drive, LTO, 2 copies of those. We get 1.5 terabytes on each one, or whatever you want to do. You can buy those relatively cheap, right, Mark? Can't believe I'm selling tape. The other thing is
£5,000 then?
well, it really depends. You can go from single small drives up to multiple thousands. So I can have a chat with you offline on that one.
think
But
budget dependent, isn't it?
it is very dependent on what you do. You can put a tape drive in a computer and you can do it cheap if you want.
I wouldn't say that a Blu-ray drive, even though it's not spinning, doesn't mean it's still there. I mean, basically, I did a little survey, so we're starting to look at that. Here we are, 1 year later, 14 users say that that particular disc was not, there was nothing on it. So, it's variables.
No, absolutely it is, yeah. So all I'm saying
just
is,
because I don't spin doesn't mean it's going to be there.
no, and so we have people who are putting it on XD cam discs because it's basically an optical drive inside or a disc inside. You've just got to make a decision on what's going to be around, you know, because the BFI who record everything off television every day for historical reasons to watch how we do our viewing patterns. I don't think they record every deal or no deal, but well, I've known them that they've put stuff back onto Digibeta, and then that's going to be a problem for them because there's not going to be heads that can read that stuff in a few years' time. So it's a tough one. I'd stick away from the Blu-ray. Sorry, I'm getting asked. We're going to be here for a couple of hours outside. You'll spot Mark and I were fully branded up, fully logoed. Come and grab a card for the competition, or just come and ask me any more questions.